Oh, but Judd, what's the bottom of the truth?
Well, sometimes that is better.
Hello, friends and fiends. Welcome to another edition of Blood and Guts, HHN Presents. And tonight, we're proud to present a new segment called Hail to the King. And with me, as always, is my partner in frights, Matt. How's it going tonight, Matt?
Dude, I'm doing fantastic, Adam, because we're getting to talk about one of my favorite movies of all time. One of the movies that really introduced me to the horror genre.
Yeah.
And it's like, honestly, it's one of the first core memories I have of watching a horror movie, and that is the great Stephen King's Silver Bullet.
That's right, Silver Bullet, starring the great Gary Busey.
Gary Busey.
Gary Busey.
But the Silver Bullet, what started out as originally was like a novella written by the great Stephen King called Psycho the Werewolf.
Yeah.
And it's a great short read, but it's a good read, and it's actually got some great art in it too of the lycanthrope going throughout the months. And I know when he originally wrote it, the full moon was going to fall like on a holiday pretty much every month. Which so when they went to do the screenplay, I was like, well, that's not plausible. So
they shortened the seasons a little bit, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But some of the changes in the book from the movie is we had Uncle Al and we had Kate turn into Uncle Red and Jane, which I guess since I've seen the movie first, I always think of Uncle Red, Gary Busey,
always
and Jane.
think of Red, yeah.
But it's a fantastic movie. Obviously, I know I'm hoping most of you have seen it now. It's come out in 1985. It really took off. I know it's a yearly tradition now on AMC's Monster Fest. Whenever Halloween rolls around, it's always playing throughout the season. And it's a great movie where you get a slice of Americana in it because it takes place like in your small town. So if you grew up in a small town, you can really relate to what's going on in this movie. Like it starts off with I can't remember if it's Memorial Day, but I know the town's having to get together, and you got the high school band.
Yeah, festival going on there.
Right.
Yeah.
And it just harkens back to the days when the towns would get together. And I mean, some still do. I know ours will do a lot of little things like that as well. But that's where you're introduced to your main characters and Marty and Jane. And, of course, Marty and his friend Brady are playing that joke on Jane, throwing a snake out in front of her and ruining her hose and making her fall in the mud. Yeah. So if you have a brother or sister, you can certainly relate to that, which I think is why this movie is so great, because it's so relatable to a lot of people.
Yeah, and the reason that I agree with you on all those points, the reason it related to me when I first saw it as a small child was, the fact that it does cycle through the seasons. Mm-hmm. So you definitely have that feeling of fall, and you have that feeling of, a little bit of spring there at the beginning,
right? And
then it kind of cycles through that. But also, it was shot here in North Carolina, our home state, Wilmington, North Carolina, it almost has this familiarity to it. The leaves, they look the same, kind of here as they do there. The trees are very similar, so even watching it as a child, I knew I had this nostalgia for it.
Right.
And I didn't realize why until later, because this is where we're from. So it almost cycling through the seasons made me feel like, oh, well, that could be my backyard. That could be my area where I live there, where the werewolf is kind of.
And Dino De Laurentiis, those studios are still being used to this day down in Wilmington, North Carolina. Yeah. So it's got a lot of good use out of it. But like you said, it's easy to see that and know that it's just a few hours down the road from where we grew up. And like I said, it just looks so similar to what we see now.
It's there near the beach too.
Yeah, and the great thing, one thing I find hilarious about this movie, though, is the fact that as far as the screenplay goes, I know Gary Busey was given freedom from Stephen King, and Daniel, don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, but Attias gave him the ability to ad-lib his lines.
Yes.
So they would do a take according to the script, and then they give him a take where he can ad-lib. Most of his ad-libs stayed in.
Right, and it seems like they almost kind of would pass it off to King, and kind of And I'm picturing it going down like this. I don't know how it really went down, but they'd kind of look at King and kind of be like, "Is that cool?" And he'd kind of go, "Yeah, man, that's all right. Yeah, we'll leave that in."
That's one of the things I think is
go.
hilarious about this movie, because Stephen King has went on record saying that he hates the screenplay. But you know who wrote the screenplay? Yeah. Stephen King.
Stephen King.
So
Exactly.
Like, how can you hate your own work? So, but I mean, I guess because it's one of the first screenplays that he actually wrote. But like I said, he's really. I think he's come around now as the years have went on, and he sees how much people have been drawn to the movie and the cult following it's got. But like I said, at the time,
classic.
he didn't care for the screenplay. But
Yeah.
One thing with this movie is with the actual werewolf itself. He wanted it to be one to be hard to see. He didn't want it to be like overly exaggerated.
He wanted it to be more of a hidden figure,
right?
As opposed to like say your Howling or your werewolf that's front and center. It's a big hulking beast.
Right.
He wanted it to be more of a kind of a hidden monster.
And I think they do
that
great
kind
job
of makes
with that.
sense with that. With his writing, he would kind of want it to be that way because you think about it, Stephen King never, well, in most cases he doesn't write something that's very out front like think about The Shining, think about something like that. Your ghosts, your characters, they're not very much like out front to get you. They're kind of more in the background, in the lore of the story. So.
Yeah, that's why I think it works well also. And like the setting, like of course it's supposed to be up in Maine. It's set in Stephen King's universe. So if you're very familiar with like Derry and Castle Rock, Tarker Mills fits into that as well.
Borders all those towns, Salem's, Jerusalem's Lot, all that kind of stuff. They all border each other.
Exactly. So it's awesome when you think about Stephen King's universe and how this fits into that. But I love the scenes like when the town folks come together after Brady's been murdered, and they're like, "We're going to go out and get him." They go out to the woods, and you see that heavy fog blanketed throughout the woods.
The Reverend's trying to stop them. Please don't
go.
Don't go.
Of course, he knows why they don't need to go.
Yeah.
He knows who's responsible. But then when they get out there, you had that one guy's like, "It's under the fog.
Yeah,
it's right here with us."
Yeah, it's very suspenseful. Looking back on it, it's a little cheesy now, but it still works. It still works very well.
And what I love about that is the character of Andy Ferriton in it. He's so gun ho. We're going to go out there. We're going to kill it. And then when he gets out there in the fog, and you can hear the growling and the snarling, and you can see on his face, we've messed up.
We've made a mistake.
He's like, we better back it up. And he's like, yeah, we better leave.
Yeah.
And then he has to watch all of his friends get slaughtered as he's running away. He's the one that led him into their death.
Yeah, and it's just, and I think even I can't remember the quotes the Reverend is using when he's trying to stop him. He's quoting Bible verses, and he's please don't.
He's like, please no, and
and he's
got
like,
and then Sheriff Howler,
quotes.
Terry Quinn's like, this is that community spirit you've been talking about.
Yeah. So you got this good like little bit of comedy, element in it, but then there's some really serious like horror elements, when the I can't remember the actor's name, the abusive dad, he's watching the wrestling match.
Oh, yeah.
And he hears the banging in the shed, and he's like, I'm going to go check that out. He's
put some rock salt.
He's a little drunk, he's going to go check it out, and he's got, elevated emotions. And when the hand comes through, the wolf hand comes through, and takes him down, you kind of feel like, we're glad this guy's gone.
Yeah,
because he was kind of a prick.
Oh yeah, in the long run, I mean, obviously, the daughter's going to be tore up, but like I said, in the long run, she's going to be a whole lot better off with that.
Yeah, with the abusive father gone.
But moving back then to like we're talking about the werewolf suit, they originally hired a dancer. To be the werewolf, but the producer Dino De
Laurentiis didn't like it at all.
He couldn't stand the movement. So Everett McGill, who played Reverend Lowe, he actually got to be in the suit there towards the end. So he ends up getting dual credit for the role.
Bill, yeah.
But and I mean, I know there's been a lot said about that suit because a lot of people refer to it as a bear wolf costume because it kind of looks like a bear.
Yeah, it kind of does look more like bears. It's got a short snout,
right?
A little shorter ears, a little bit, kind of.
My oldest son, whenever he first watched it, he'd actually say, "I want to watch the Beowulf movie." So it actually kind of makes sense. But now I've always, I guess maybe because it's one of the nostalgia. My eyes were watching. It was the first werewolf movie I really seen. I've always loved that suit, and like to me, in my head,
I thought it's a great makeup and a great suit. And I remember that they were delayed. On when are we going to see the suit? When are we going to get to see the suit? And so the scene when the final confrontation when he bursts through in the suit, they hadn't really seen that much of it, if not any at all.
Right.
And so their reactions were like real. Oh shit! here he is with the suit. You know,
It's kind of like it makes you think about Jaws when the shark wasn't working. They had to kind of get like a little bit smart with how they're filming their schedule around, or how can we do scenes without the suit. So it caused them like to have some ingenuity on the set.
And you know, I don't mind the suit. I mean, I think about it in my mind. I think about the classic, great werewolf films. You have, you know, of course, American Werewolf, The Howling. Late Phases has another couple of great werewolf
Dog Soldiers,
things like this, and then I compare it to those, or just kind of hold it up there, and it's a really good makeup, and actually when you go back and look at it, it stands the test of time. You know, it's a little different, yeah. It's a little bit. That was King's specifications,
right? And I know Dino De Laurentiis didn't like the suit, but the great Carl Rambaldi, who worked on King Kong in 1976, made that big animatronic. He's the one that designed the suit, and I think he done a fantastic job. And it set out what Stephen King wanted to accomplish. I thought he done a great job with it.
Right, and I can't remember. I read something about how I don't remember how many puppeteers it took to animate the face.
I want to say it was at least 3 or 4 people. Like
it
maybe
not
just the face, but
people.
like everything. Yeah.
But the movement of the mouth and the eyes and the lips and the thing, it was quite detailed.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that just reminded me. I know one of the trivia was that when you read in the original press release when it came out, the werewolf was like in the book. They'd say he'd almost snarl words.
Right, speaking.
And they wanted him to speak in the movie. Now, I never did say when they ultimately decided against it, but I'm glad they did, just because that's not something I really want to see. I want it to be more like a primal beast.
Yeah, and I mean, even his use of the weapon of the bat, almost, and this is for me personally,
right?
Even his use of the bat takes me out of it just a little bit, because I'm used to my werewolves in my own imagination just using claws and brawn and just ripping things apart. So to have him have a bat, it's cool. Yes,
right.
It is cool. But in my personal opinion, it's a little step out of the reality. But then once you get to the Reverend Lowe and you get to the evil behind when he's running Marty off the road and his actions, it kind of brings it back full center for me, and I can come back into the film and I can say, okay, yes, this is an evil character. You know, this Reverend.
That's one, like, speaking of that, that's just one of the greatest scenes once he corners him in that broken down bridge.
Yes.
And then he's talking about, like, you know, he's like, Marty, I would never kill myself, because and then starts trying to justify all the murders that he's done, saying like, if I hadn't killed her, she'd be burning in hell right now. Just trying to justify in his head why it's okay for him to be what he is, that he's almost working through God, punishing these evildoers.
And let's go ahead and talk about, okay, so imagine you're a first-time viewer of this. You're a child. It doesn't matter what age you are. You're a first-time viewer of this. You get to the scene where the sister and brother, they come together, you know, and form a connection.
A bond,
and they decide, bond, yes. And they decide, we're going to find out who this person is. That scene where she's going round and round, looking for people, looking in their eyes to see if they've been wounded. When I first saw this film, that part got me, because there's such a suspense there.
Yes.
Where she's going up, you know, and the man's in the barber chair, and he's got his face covered up, and this and that and the other, you know, and looking for that character with the wounded eye. There's such a clinching moment there where you're like, could it be that guy? Maybe it's the mailman. Maybe it's this other guy. No, and then you find out, you know, she goes to take the bottles. It's the Reverend Lowe.
Right. I mean, they kind of tip their hand a little bit when he has the dream.
Well, a little bit.
But like I said, that's when it confirms it, because you see him sitting there gardening, and then he's got that eye patch on.
Yeah.
And then she don't know it for sure yet until she's cornered in the garage, and he shows up, and she sees that eye patch. So then she knows, we've got our guy.
We've got our guy. But that scene is just great suspense, and I feel like, you know, I'm not exactly sure, because it's been so long since I've read the book, if that was lifted from the book, but I know that acts as suspense, and that itself would be something that would be in a King story.
I can speak to that one because I can remember it well. Like in the book, he's actually a reverend at another church that Marty and Jane don't go to.
Okay.
And so in the book, Marty is actually going trick-or-treating, and he's in it's a Yoda mask or some other mask where Reverend Lowe can't see him. And when he comes to the door to give him the candy, Marty sees that he has the eye.
He has the eye, okay.
And that's how he finds it in the book. Like I said, it's still the same kind of suspense in the book as that where you realize it.
And that's why we all love King, because he takes that suspense and he draws it out like molasses.
Yes.
He just draws that out, and it kind of makes you wait for it. He makes you wait for that key moment, and then when you see it, you're like, "Oh shit, that's the preacher. You know,
And going back to speak on your bond, I thought that was perfectly said. Because what's great about this movie is too, once they realize they've got their guy, do they go to their
yeah,
parents?
she doesn't want to believe him. She
Yeah.
doesn't want to
Right,
believe him.
but
She's
what-
like, you're crazy.
Right, but once she does believe him, do they go to their parents? No,
No.
they turn to the only person they know they'll believe him, which is Uncle Red, Gary
Uncle Red,
Busey.
the great Gary Busey.
And watching them explain it to him, and of course he thinks they're all crazy. He's like, if a man take a rocket to the eye, he either be in the hospital or he be dead.
Yes.
And so decides then he's going to go to the great Terry O'Quinn, Sheriff Howler, and he's like, I just want you to check him out. And he's like, you don't believe this, do you? He's like, you do, don't you?
So it's and Gary Busey added just this liveliness to the character, and the rest of the family, he's kind of like the black sheep
Yeah.
of the family, but the kids love him,
Yeah, and it's so
and
relatable.
so but
'cause-
he
I
believes the children.
yeah, I know, and I know every family has an Uncle Red in it. And that's what makes this movie so relatable.
I might be the Uncle
Yeah, you
Red
might
of
be,
my
you might be
family.
the Uncle Red in your
I
family.
might be the Uncle Red.
But, and of course, though, Sheriff Howler, of all things, he doesn't want to go check out Reverend Lowe during the day. He's going to go in the middle of the night.
Middle of the
But
night, of
that
course.
is such a great scene whenever he
Yeah.
confronts him and he sees the paint on the car that matches Marty's motorcycle or a wheelchair where he hits him.
Yep.
And that whole tense scene, the suspense builds like, I think you ought to come with me, Reverend, and draws his gun. And then the Reverend beats him with a bat and starts changing
Yep.
right in front of him.
Yep.
The only
So
thing
just classic suspense. There.
I wish, and it's because obviously after American Werewolf and Howling come out, I wish you could have seen a little bit more of the transformation. But I know this movie had a light budget, so
Yeah.
they kind of squeezed out what they could.
And also maybe the transformation was light because King's specifications of
Yeah,
he
that's
wants
true.
to be hidden in the dark. I mean, he doesn't want a full werewolf transformation right there in front of it.
Right.
The lens and
And
all that.
Then
So-
kind of moving forward, then towards the end of the movie, once the hit the final encounter with the werewolf, whenever you got Uncle Red, Marty, and Jane on Halloween night waiting for it to come, that suspense build up where they wake up at 2 a.m. Jane spots it out the window, and then the power cuts,
Power's off.
and you hear
Of
that
course
music
the
just
power's
dun
off.
dun 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 dun,
Yep.
and then it busts through the wall. I was actually reading an interview with Gary Busey. And he was talking about they did that busting through the wall scene in one take, and said so the action was genuine, like their
The
reactions.
reactions, yeah, we're like, oh,
Yeah.
here it comes through the through the wall.
And this, I don't know, I just can't get this out of my head, but Gary Busey talks about how for the scenes where the werewolf was just throwing him around the room, said they had hydraulic presses built in, and he would take a run and jump, and then the hydraulic press, he'd go flying into furniture. So I can just laugh thinking about Gary Busey just throwing himself into stuff.
I know, and I was reading that part earlier, and then I thought about this, as the film canon goes, is like, what happens when the parents come home? They find out
A dead preacher in the
what
movie.
is going on. There's a dead preacher. There's all our furniture's messed up. Our dishes are broken. Like,
Yeah.
what is going on here?
But man, it's such a fantastic film, and like even before that, whenever he takes Marty and Jane's like silver medallion and her necklace,
Yeah,
and
to melt
makes
it
a silver
down.
bowl, that's just
I
a
love
great
it.
sequence there
I
too.
love it.
And you think about the score of the movie; it just fits right in with the theme, and like it's just so many wonderful elements in this movie.
Yeah, man. Like I said, that drawing back to that, the nostalgia for me is, I felt an instant nostalgia to it before I even knew it was shot in Wilmington,
Right.
North Carolina, and now it holds even more nostalgia because I can say that I understand why the scenes look the way they look, why the sets look the way they look, the leaves, the ground, the trees,
Right.
all the stuff.
Because I know it's supposed to be set in Maine, but like I said, to me, obviously it's filmed in North Carolina. It looks just like like the church looks almost exactly like my church.
Yeah, and a lot of these settings you can find
Yeah.
if you take a drive from here down the street, you can, in the fall, especially when the leaves are turning, you can find any of these settings right around here, and
Absolutely.
that's why it holds that in my heart for me.
Me too. That's what makes this movie special. It's a movie, like I said, where it's easily relatable for a lot of people. Like
Oh, yeah.
Anybody can watch this movie and relate to a character. I mean, you got Marty, and that's one good thing you think about today. Like he's handicapped, so I mean, there's like maybe
Yeah.
not as much diversity in it, but there's a lot of things that you can relate to.
Oh yeah,
But this movie, like I said, when it come out, it may not lit the box office world on fire, but it didn't have to because it did have a lot of budget. But once it hit VHS, and like I said, especially nowadays with all these other generations, it has really got a good cult following.
yeah,
And like I said, it's something. It's a movie I can
And
pop
it
in and
needs
watch
it.
all the time.
yeah. I could do this once a month. I could
Mm-hmm.
watch it, and just fall in love with it again.
Absolutely. As you can see, I'm always excited to talk about Silver Bullet. Like I said, it's one of my favorite horror movies of all time.
Yeah. And so leave us some notes down in the comments there. Tell us what you think about Silver Bullet. Tell us what you think about Stephen King.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be covering a lot of King works in the future under our segment, Hail to the King, which is a new segment. We're going to see how you guys like it. And if you like this, leave us a like.
Hey.
Thumbs up.
Leave us a like, comment what Stephen King movie you'd like to see us cover. Like I said, because we're going to enjoy doing this segment. There's a lot of great material we can pull from Stephen King.
Yeah, and then leave us some comments. Tell us what King works that haven't been made into a film yet would you like to see turned into a film. What has potential, what doesn't, that type of thing. But as always, boys and ghouls, stay tuned for more Blood and Guts.